Our dear grade 12 learners, today I will just be taking you through the do's and the don'ts and what is expected from you when you'll be writing your theory paper 2 test for next week. So without any waste of time, because we only have an hour for this session, here's the structure of the paper, of which I believe that we are now familiar with it. The total marks for this paper that you'll be writing will be out of 50 marks, and the duration is 1 hour, which is your 16 minutes. Now, the paper will have two sections. We'll have section A and section B. Now, in your section A, those are your short questions, your match items, your multiple choice, your true or false. Then in section B, those are your long questions, which consist of system technologies, social implication, and social development. So because it is just a test of 50 marks, we do not have section C, that one of integrated scenarios that we usually have in examination. Now, when preparing for your assessment, my dear learners, these are the resources that you need to prepare for your assessment. Now, without these resources, it will definitely be difficult for you to prepare for your assessment and actually make it when you are writing your assessment. So you need your CAPS document. Remember your CAPS document, the curriculum assessment policy statement. It is the one that outlines the content that needs to be taught in each and every subject. Now we also have the annual teaching plan. Annual teaching plan, it also outlines what is inside the CAPS document. Remember, in the CAPS document, it will just indicate the content that needs to be covered in each and every term. However, in your annual teaching plan, that is whereby the content is actually divided according to the number of weeks that we have per term. So hence, it is very important that you also have your annual teaching plan, your ATP, when you are preparing, so that you prepare the content that is relevant to the term that we are in. I've realized that most of you are actually having that ATP at the beginning of your class activity books, which is very good because you are also able to track how far you are in terms of your content. You also need your examination guidelines, which will also explain how your assessment or examination will be like, the content that you also expect, and the content that will no longer be part of examination, so that you don't find yourself studying something that will not be part of your examination. You'll need your textbooks. We are using the different textbooks at our schools. However, they are all relevant. They are all in line with the CAPS document. Then you also need your notes, my dear learners. You also need your notes, and also ensure that you make use of the previous question papers for you to be able to adapt to the style of the questions, to the style of different cognitive levels on how the questions are posed and how the questions should be responded to. Now, these are all the resources that you will need in ensuring that you prepare for all your assessments from now until the end of the year, when you will now be called the candidates and no longer learners. So you are almost there. Now, without any waste of time, looking at our section A, this is what is expected from you in terms of your section A. Remember, we said the section A is our short questions. Now, my dear learners, ensure that you write answer next to the correct question number. If you are writing an answer for 1.1, please ensure that you write that answer next to 1.1, not next to 1.2. Do not leave out any questions in section A. When you are in doubt, eliminate incorrect answers and guess your answer from the remaining choices. Please make sure that you write letters clearly. A D should not look like an O, because now it will become a challenge if on the options that you are given, we also have option O. then it is difficult for a marker to decide or to determine if your answer was actually D or was actually O. So please ensure that you write the letters clearly so that it is easy for the marker to mark your answer. Do not give more than one answer. As you can see there on the example of 1.1, whereby you'll give A or P. That is not supposed to happen in our section A. You should not give more than one answer. Please ensure that you only give one answer. If you give more than one answer, only the first one will be marked. Usually, if you give more than one answer, that answer was not supposed to be marked. But please ensure that you only write one. Otherwise, the first answer will be marked even if the second answer is correct. Only the first answer will be marked. So now in your section A, beware of questions containing the words not and false. For an example, if the question says, which one of the following is not an example of input devices? Now you ignore the word not, then you go and look for the example of input device, then you give that as an answer. Then you're not going to get it correct because the question will have specified that which one is not. So please, when you're in section A, beware of the question that contains these words not or false. On your true or false question, you are expected to write the word false and give the term to make the false statement true. Otherwise, if you don't correct the underlined term to make it through, then you're not going to get any mark, even if your false is correct. So please ensure that on your true or false, when you give false as an answer, you rectify. Usually there will be a word that is underlined for you to rectify if you say the statement is false. So please don't write all truths just to avoid to rectifying the incorrect words. So please ensure that you prepare thoroughly also for our section A. Now write your answer next to the correct question number, even in section B, or we are now in section B. You write your answer next to the correct number. Even if we or the marker can see that the answer that you have written on 4.2, it is actually the correct answer for 4.3. That will not be marked correct as 4.3 because now you have wrote the answer on 4.2. So please ensure that you write your answer next to the correct question number. Again, even in section B, do not leave out any question. A guess answer may award a 1 mark, which is better than 0. In short, my dear learners, you cannot pass your test or examination if now you're gonna leave out the question without answering them. So please try by all means not to leave out any question. Now you need to be cautious of the mark allocation. 1 fact is equals to 1 mark. So you take note of mark allocation. If the question asks for 2 facts, then you provide at least 2 or more if you can. However, you need to be cautious of the question. If the question says give or if it says, as I was saying on this slide, that you should give your answer in general terms. Refer to the spreadsheet instead of MS Excel or database instead of Access. We only give the brand name if the question requires you to give the example. Right. I was saying that you should read the scenario at least twice to familiarize yourself with the situation, and then you should highlight the important facts. So these scenarios are not just there to make our question paper looks good and beautiful, but the scenarios, it says when there is a scenario on the questions, then your questions are going to be based on the scenario. So whenever you are given any scenario in section B or C, always make sure that you refer back to the scenario when answering the questions. Because more often than not, you make a mistake of answering the question in general without looking at the scenario. So you should make sure that you answer your question according to the limitation given in the scenario. For an example, you might be told that Rose is an elderly lady who needs a computer to type the occasional letters. Now, in this case, if you were to recommend the type of a computer that is going to be used by Rose, you would not recommend the top of the range laptop or a computer. But if you are not going to refer back to the scenario, now you're going to give a top of the range specification of the computer for this for that question, of which it will not be in line with the scenario. So please, my dear learners, ensure that you refer back to the scenario whenever you are answering the questions, especially in your section B actually, and your section C. Then start with the sections or the questions you feel most comfortable with. Then you leave the sections or the question that you are struggling with for last. So you don't necessarily have to start with question one just because the question one is the one that is beginning, that is starting your question paper. So you can actually start with any question and start with any section, as long as you have clearly indicated that this is question 4, this is question 5, this is question 6. Then you can start with the one that you feel most comfortable with, the one that you know that you're going to collect most of the marks from. Now, never use any of the following words without proper explanation or comparison. I know that your teachers, my dear learners, are telling you this all the time. So we are just making emphasis on it. We're not saying that you should not use the word better, but you need to give a proper explanation. Why do you say that this will be better than this? So you cannot just say that this will be better than this, then you leave it as it is. You need to give explanation. Why is it going to be better? How is it going to be better? What is it that is going to make it better? So you're faster, you're better, you're easier, you're more efficient, you're cheaper. They should not be used without a proper explanation or comparison. Otherwise, you are not going to get the marks. We always talk about this, but even during the final examination at the marking center, we always get the responses of this one it is faster, this one it is better, this one it is easier to use. So please, my dear learners, ensure that you give a proper explanation and a proper comparison. That on this one, the data transmission will be faster than that one. You see now the word faster, it is supported by explanation. How is it going to be faster? The data transmission is going to be faster. So please ensure that we answer in details. Always use computer terminology. Avoid using the words such as stuff and things. Avoid using the words such as stuff and things. And you always use those words and you actually going to lose a lot of marks by doing that. Always use computer terminology. If it is a device, it is a device. It's not a thing. So please be careful of that one. Where possible, provide examples and substantiate your answer. When answering, please don't be vague. Don't let the marker wonder what were you meaning by the response that you have provided. For an example, if the question says, suggest a way to improve battery life on a laptop, we don't just answer by saying set brightness. How do you set the brightness? You must set the brightness lower, because even setting the brightness higher, it's still setting the brightness. And by setting the brightness higher, it will not actually assist in improving your battery life. So please don't be vague when you are answering. Do as many past question papers as possible in order to prepare for your theory test examination and know your terminology. Ensure that you know your terminology. Nze ke le teng, Mmeselo.
Yes.
Thank you. Right, work on mark per minute. You have 60 minutes to complete the 50 marks. Instead of rushing to leave the examination room, add the facts to your questions or fill in questions that you may have left out. So please, when you see your friend going out, don't rush to go out as well, but go back to your script and look where you have left spaces and try to fill those spaces. Even whereby you are not sure about your answers, that is now the time for you to go back and fill in those answers that you did not feel confident about. Right. Now, your question paper will always have this action words or action verb that is used in the theory test or examination, which are not limited to the following. The action verb, you might have the compare or differentiate. Now, it means that on this type of a question, you show both the differences and the similarities of the specific concept. The question might say compare Rom and Ren. Now you find the relationship between the two concepts, which features is used by each, the functions, the uses, the alikes, and the differences. So that is how you should ensure that you answer the questions depending on the action word that is used on the question. Now, if you have your define, you give a clear, concise, formal meaning of a term or a concept. If the question says define the term convergence, you use short, concise description of main feature. You only focus on the facts in a sentence or two, depending on the mark allocation. If the mark allocation is two, then you must give the two facts in that particular question. So meaning you'll have your two sentences, which will be the two facts, not two sentences of one fact. Now, if the question says give, for an example, to say give one or more reasons or examples in full sentences. Give two reasons for using an internet service provider that is used when your reason or examples are required. Your name or list question, you name to give one word for a term or a concept list when two or more items are required. So please let us, if you see the name or list question and it says name or list two, please stick to two. If you give three, only the first two will be marked. But if the question says give, you can give more, then the correct answers will be marked. But specifically on the name and list, please note that one down. Especially on the name and list, you stick to the required number. So usually this is used for all one-word answer or answers consisting of a list of items. List 5 input devices. So you just list without explaining. Right. Then explain, you give full reason or justification for something or how and why something happens or works. For an example, explain how phishing works. Now you explain things about the topic such as what is it, what is phishing, where and when is it used, or where is it found, why is it used, or why is it needed, how it is used. Now your explanation should be brief and will not necessarily require technical details. So these are your action words or verbs that is used in your theory test. So please, you need to be familiar with them so that you know how to respond to your question. Now, these are also found in the examination guideline. So now this concept and terminology in CAT, they require a depth of knowledge for all the concept and terminologies, which include knowing the definition, what is it, the purpose or function of that term, what it does, why is it needed, the advantages or the benefits, the disadvantages or limitation, and also how is it applied in an ICT environment. As I've said, you look at a scenario, if you are given a scenario, and your answer should actually be based on the scenario. So if the question asks, what will be the benefit of a person who's running, say for an example, a tuck shop? What will be the benefit for that person to use a computer? Now your answer cannot be learner's marks will be recorded on the computer, because now learner's marks and the tax shop, they are not related. So your answer should be based on the scenario. Even though your answer might be correct that the computer can be used to record learner's marks only in the school environment, not in the business environment. So it is also important that as and when you are studying the concept or the terminologies, you are also able to say how are they used in the ICT environment. Right, now moving straight to our assessment framework. I don't know, before moving to the assessment framework, Marcelo, if is there any question
No,
or everything is clear?
yes,
Thank you
everything
very
is
much.
clear. We can continue.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Right. Moving to our assessment framework, as I've said that I believe everyone is having the assessment framework. Now, this is not a question paper, my dear learners. Assessment framework is taken from your ATP. If you can open your ATP now, you will see that everything that is mentioned on the assessment framework, it appears as it is in the ATP. So we don't have questions here. So you don't know how is the question going to be posed, but it is just the content that you're supposed to know for this term. So when you are preparing yourself, your preparation is not only limited to this assessment framework, all the content that you did in term one. It is very important to ensure that you prepare yourself, because that content will be part of your junior examination, will be part of your trial examination, and will definitely be part of your final examination. So as if indicated, we are writing on the 10th of March, and our paper will be having 6 questions. The total mark for the paper is 50 marks, then the time is 1 hour. Now in section A, we'll be having your question 1, which is multiple choice for 5 marks, question 2, match items for 5 marks, question true or false for 5 marks. So now maybe one might ask, what is the content that we show on this section A? Everything that has been taught in term one. So this section, it includes all the topics, all your system technologies, or all your practical content that was done in term one. So everything is actually included in here. Your social implications, your system technologies, your general concept, everything that you have been taught actually in term one. Now moving on to section B. Section B is your system technologies. Your section B is your system technologies. So under system technologies, the first bullet there, we have types of computer systems for different uses. Now, remember, we have those different types of users: your personal, your small office, home office, your mobile, your power user, your disabled users. Now, all these users, they are determined by the purpose and the features or specifications that are needed on the computers that they are going to use. Now we can couple the second bullet with the first one, making buying decision. For you to be able to know what to buy, you need to know why are you buying it. You need to know if whatever that you want to buy, is it going to be fit for the purpose? In other words, how are you going to use your computer? For an example, if you are asked to suggest an output device that can be used by a disabled user, you cannot just say, for an example, say a printer. Because now if you say a printer, how is it going to assist a blind person, depending on the scenario, of course, or the question. Yeah, if the question asks for the output device for a blind person, you cannot just say a printer, but it should be a printer that will be relevant, a printer that will serve a purpose to that kind of a user, which is a blind user. In this case, it says we will need a braille printer, so that it will bring the documents that a blind person will be able to actually read. So you need to look at the specification and the use of that particular a particular user so that you can be able to make a buying decision or suggest the devices that is actually needed by that particular particular user. Now we also have on the third bullet the system software. Remember, we have the application software, we also have the system software. So under system softwares, we can have your operating system, your utility softwares. So you should be in a position of understanding what is the purpose of operating system. What are the examples of the operating system? What is it used for? What is the utility software? What are the examples of your utility softwares? Your operating systems, your Windows, your Linux, your Android, your iOS, you name them. Then under utility software, you might have your antiviruses, your file compression software, such as your WinZip or your 7-zip. So those are the softwares that you actually need to go and prepare yourselves on. So unfortunately, we do not know what the question will actually be about. Your input and output devices. I think by now you are familiar with the input and output devices. We've been doing them since grade 10. So as I was making an example with the devices for maybe a user who is blind. So ensure that when you are required to give examples of the devices for a particular user, you give the examples that will be actually relevant to that particular user. So different input and output devices for different users, or the specific purpose of actually using those particular devices. Then we also have our web-based application versus the installed applications. This is whereby you should be able to know the difference, the advantages, the disadvantages, and the examples that when you're talking about this application, when you're talking about the web-based applications, what are the examples? When you're talking about the installed applications, what are the what are the actually the examples of those applications? What do they offer? What is the purpose of each? So you need to ensure that you prepare thoroughly. You don't just prepare yourself on the definitions, then you leave it there. So you need to understand it in details. Remember that slide that we talked about the depth of understanding these terminologies. Right, then after input and output devices, we have our base web-based. Okay, we are done with that one. Then the next bullet is about the compressing and decompressing of files or folders password, whereby you use your software such as your 7-zip. So you need to understand why is it important? Why is it important for you to compress your file, and how do you compress? How do you decompress using those software such as your 7-zip and your WinRAR? So those are the things that you need to prepare yourself on. As I've indicated, these are coming from your ATP. Then lastly, on system technologies, your software maintenance. How do you maintain your softwares? So that is whereby you look at your patches versus your updates and versus your versions. So ensure that you thoroughly prepare yourself on that one. Right, so that is our question 4 of system technologies. Now, this system technologies, it comprises of your general concepts, your hardwares, as well as your softwares. All right, moving on to question 5. Under question 5, we have the environmental issues. Now, my dear learners, as good as computers are, they are, however, having or have effects on the environment. So now this is whereby you look at things like the green computing and the potential negative effects of the usage of the computer, such as the pollution, your e-waste, and the health hazard. On the pollution, that is whereby you talk about your noise pollution, your air pollution, and the water pollution. That is brought by the usage of the computers, the e-waste, throwing away the devices, either old or no longer in use, and also the health problems that might be caused by the burning of the old computer. So if that toxic smoke is inhaled,
Josh,
so it might
Josh,
poses so it might poses the health problems to the people, actually to the environment at large. So now we should also be able to understand how to deal with these environmental issues. How can you protect the environment? How can we limit the e-waste? How can we limit the pollution when using these computers? So please go and thoroughly prepare yourself on the environmental issues under the social implications. Lastly, under social implications, we have the user-centered design in the software application. So that is whereby you can design your website, database forms, the presentation documents, or the information. So you also need to understand the importance of user-centered design. What are the benefits, the advantages of user-centered design, and the factors that you need to consider when designing either your website or designing your database form or the presentation document. What is it that you actually need to consider when designing all those software application?
Josh,
Right. Right. So that is our question 5, the social implication in question 5. Then moving on to our last question, which is question 6. Question 6 will be based on the solution development.
Josh,
Now, solution. It seems like someone want to say something. Thank you. Now, the question 6 is actually the solution development. That is whereby you'll have the practical questions, but in theory. So it is very important that you not only know how to do things in practical, but you should also understand them, because now in theory you'll be expected to write them without actually having a computer in front of you. So now the first bullet on the solution development is database report and the functions. So now you need to be in a know of your elements of the report. When you are creating a report, what are the elements of your report? Your report header, your details line, group header, group footer, report footer, all those elements of the report. You need to know and actually understand them. Then we also have functions there in the report footer. So we have the
uh,
common functions.
this-
We have the common functions that are used in the report, your sum, your max, your mean, your average, and your count. So you need to know where to do those functions and how to do them. So you need to actually understand them. So there are certain functions that are actually not used in the report. You can't have them. We can't have them in the report, your count if, your sum if, your nested if, you name them. So we usually have those basics functions actually in the report. Then the Excel function, please be able to explain the functions, even the functions from grade 10 and 11, they are still relevant to be assessed in your grade 12 paper. Your most common functions, your sum, your max, your mean, your count if, sum ifs, you name them, all those basic functions. Like I've said, you don't need only to know how to use them, but you should also be able to explain what is this one used for, when to use this one, why do you use this one, not the other one. Right, then you'll also have the thread changes. The thread changes are from your word processing, which includes accept and rejecting the changes. And how do you do that? And why do you actually have to do the thread changes, or why do we have to have the thread changes in the word processing? Then lastly, that is the document reviewing. That is whereby you proofing your document to check the spelling and the grammar, the comments, and the word count. So on each, my learners, you need to be able to know why is each used. Why do we have to check the spelling and grammar? Why do we have to have comments in the document reviewing, the word count, all those the elements of proofing? We need to know and understand why is each one used. On that note, I think this brings us to the end of our assessment framework, the one that we will use to prepare ourselves for the test that we're going to write on the 10th. Thank you, Marcelo.